Alright, time for another DraftScience video presentation. Okay. Comments. I've sort of tried to make people understand there's things called trolls on the internet. Unaccountable, cowardly bullshitters who invade your privacy and do all kinds of crazy stuff because they think they're on a mission from God to kill the devil or some kind of wacky bullshit. So you have these lunatics, okay, who create fake accounts and steal other people's images and go on the internet to make fake comments, fake news. They really shouldn't be in any way encouraged. That is, people really shouldn't interact with them, So the Miskamamuskus guy has done so, which he shouldn't have done, but he probably just didn't know any better. You really have to look at the comments, then go to the channel, and you'll see the channel doesn't have any content, and it was created, 2 weeks ago, and it's just a troll account. It's just intended for the purpose to make noises, okay, and force somebody to waste time responding to lies, and that's all they are. False premises, misquotes, all kinds of crap like that. And it's just part of the fact that this is one of these things you can see as part of idiocracy, is the permissive, the allowing of the culture to turn to shit, to allow the spammers and the liars and the fakers and the phonies to own your mediums. That's just a big mistake, okay? If you're not smart enough to know you can't do that, that's really dumb. That kind of noise will degrade every process in your civilization. It's just way too expensive. Way too many man hours thrown away on the noisemakers. So anyway, it's an important social commentary that these people represent. The unaccountable trolls, your anonymous kind of people, your VPNers, I have to protect my security so nobody can see that I'm a fucking tax cheat and I'm this and I'm that. People don't want accountability. That's why we have an illegal immigration problem. Is because people don't want real security, social security numbers. They don't want to be followable. They don't want their money to be traceable. They don't want their activities to in any way be held to any scrutiny, because they are all cheaters. If the camera isn't on, they'll loot the store. They'll take everything. And then they'll complain about it when they'll watch it on TV and go, look at those horrible people. When they are the horrible people. They're just doing it in their little white collar way. They're looters with little white collars. Oh, it's just sad that the world has come to this, where these gutless cowards can slander people, they can do all kinds of things, and they don't have to take any responsibility for it. They don't have to be called out. There's no system that says you can't do that. That guy has a right to, force you to man up and ball up if you're going to say that kind of shit. Yeah. But anyway, enough. Let's get to any kind of argument that might be veiled in this bullshit. And there's no argument here. Okay? Just as they'll never produce the evidence of the 10-ton train having less energy than the 5-ton train going twice as fast, or they'll never show me a 60-mile-an-hour car that uses 4 times as much gas as the 30-mile-an-hour car. They'll never show any evidence for their theories. They'll never show me the photon bent twice as much by the gravity. Anyway, you say your explanation fits perfectly with Huygens. That's not what I said. What I said is Huygens fits perfectly with my explanation. What I said is the end result of Huygens is to create 2 waves in exactly the location I'm claiming the scatter's coming from. Exactly the location that doesn't fit water waves, that doesn't fit anything, okay, that doesn't make any rational sense. So Huygens gives you a model. Here's the slit. You're saying the Huygens process takes place. The waves come in. The waves do an infinite number of little baby waves to create the next wave. Okay, that Huygens process is taking place. An infinite number, let's understand, infinite number. In, infinitesimally small spaces, we have an infinite number of something happening. That's their theory. the one they like, the one they think it makes really good sense. And what they basically say is because of, I don't know, I can't even explain it because frankly I can't understand what the hell they're talking about. So an infinite number of little waves come in. The infinite number of little waves somehow all cancel out. All these little infinite number of little waves cancel out. And the only ones that survive the cancellation process is this wave and this wave. Okay, so this is the surface. Let's understand. This is the opening. Okay, let me draw it a little bigger so there's no confusion. No one gets this is a surface and this is a surface. All right. So you have two waves here. This is how they explain the single slit. And so this is perfectly consistent for with all the math. The simple math they do only has this variable, which is usually labeled A, okay, and this variable, which is usually labeled L. I mean, this could be D sometimes. This is D. D. So it's either those are the only variables in the math, and the frequency of the light, of course. So you have the frequency of the light, lambda. Okay, you have the distance between the surfaces, and you have L. Now I've just pointed out that L's a radius, right? So let's play it. Let's just do what I said and contrast it to the lie in this in this comment, right? Because all I'm saying to you is, okay, you've conceded through Huygens the surface is the location where the vectors will be drawn from. And all I've pointed out is we know the L can't change in the equation. So when you do, say, this vector and this vector, or you do, this vector and this, this vector and this vector and, this vector, you have to use the same length. Okay, so the whole thing is happening on an arc. And once you understand that, then this idea of a path length difference becomes kind of moot, as anything complicated, because right here you have a solid definition of the path length difference. At 90 degrees, okay, these two lines at 90 degrees at an L distance, okay, you're guaranteed the path length difference is right on the line. You don't have to do any of this geometry, right? So there's no, see, you have this line and you have this line and you're trying to predict this line. You're trying to calculate it as to how many wavelengths it is. And clearly here it just shows you because the two lines are right on top of each other and you can just see what the extra is. It's right there in front of you. You can't miss it. So if this is, as I pointed out, if it's an even number, okay, things, and no remainder, zero remainder, okay, then you can have a constructive interference here, but only in that case, even numbers. And if it's an odd number, or, if it's 15, half of 15 is going to be 7.5. So here you have a remainder now here in the middle. So obviously that has to be a destructive. And if it's, some number like 15.6, well, then you're going to get some different remainder, but you're going to be stuck with the same 7. So anyway, but that tells you where every single one of these little notches is going to be. So I'm just saying, once they've established that the waves are here, so just understand, Huygens says this is the wave and this is the wave. Those are the locations Huygens is predicting, okay, for the source. And obviously that's exactly what I'm saying, because I'm saying the only photons that are relevant to the fringe pattern are the ones that go by the surface and get broken. Okay, that is scattered to all the locations, and obviously the ones that are in phase become visible photon. The ones that are not in phase become not visible photon. Okay, so there's no photon at that location. It didn't cancel anything. It's just that you didn't put the pieces back together in the right order. The energy still hit, the little bits still hit. They just didn't hit at the right frequency, the resonant frequency of the atoms, and therefore didn't produce the reflection and the action. Yeah, so that's probably enough. I mean, it's so simple, but there's no denying this is the location they're using, the surfaces. Now I read you the stack exchange guy explaining, and he said the leftmost of the leftmost surface of the left slits. So if there was two slits, right? Obviously, left and left couldn't mean anything other than the outside, right? And right couldn't mean anything but the rightmost. So clearly, again, another example. So why don't you say the stack exchange guy was wrong? Did you say that in a comment? No. See the lies, see the deception, see the chicanery. They'll never say Feynman was wrong or Lewin was wrong or some other expert was wrong when clearly they're wrong. They won't admit it. They won't concede it because their own theory. See, they're not really defending the conventional theory. They're defending their own magical notion that somehow it has to be true. That there's magic in the universe, that the Wu-averse has to be true because that's what they're dependent on. Their whole philosophy is geared towards there being some kind of fake world where fake people are honored. That they, when they die, they go to a gold medal ceremony and they get honors for being fakes and liars and slanderers and bums and shitholes and crud buckets. That being a shitty person is a great thing to be. Being a ballless, dickless little sack of cowardly shit is hero material. Yeah. They need that to be true. They need it really badly. Okay, anyway. You say your explanation perfectly fits with Huygens math. There's no Huygens math. Okay, so that's another thing there's no math. Anyway, there's just an assumption about what happens to an infinite number of little waves. You can't really do infinite math, just let you know. But then you go on to say the diffraction pattern is caused by light bouncing off, so that's just another lie. Okay, so clearly just a lie, right? I mean, I made it clear. It's not just bouncing off the surfaces. I don't say that. I'm saying there's a bunch of electrons, and that the photon is a composite object. The little bits of momentum hit the electron, move the electron. As the electron moves, it creates a new photon in that direction, a new element of a photon. That element may never get turned into a visible photon. It might just stay infrared. It might just stay as gravity. But the fact is, that's what happens. That's how the photons change direction, is they change the direction of an electron, and the electron causes the action in the universe that will be similar to the action the photon had, except in a new direction. So that's the truth, I say, and then you say this bullshit, say this misparaphrase, this lie. That's all you have is lies. So this is how desperate they are. They can't come to me with evidence or links. No links, right? Just let's concede. They have provided no evidence they defend. No statements they'll defend. They can't link me to a single argument made by a single physicist that they can defend. They know it's flawed. They know I'll rip it a new asshole. That's why they won't provide the link, is because they know I'll show how it's a big pile of fucking stinking shit. Anyway, first of all, that wouldn't cause a diffraction pattern. So obviously straw man doesn't create a meaningful argument. So clearly a straw man. I never said it bounces off the edges. I said it's scattered in all directions, which clearly, each little bit goes its own way. They're rays, idiot. Okay, the rays of sun. Okay, I mean, there's zillions of them. And when you add them all up, it looks like a nice little consistent pile of light. But it isn't. Each one is an individual going in individual direction. All right. So clearly it would scatter creates diffraction. I mean, they're the same thing. You can't really separate the two words. Scatter and diffraction would add up to exactly the same thing. So a ray theory that talked about scatter and a wave theory that talked about diffraction would be talking about exactly the same phenomenon. You probably know that. You're not really too stupid to know that. So you're just playing a game with words, because that's all you can do, because you don't have anything called evidence supporting your argument. If you had it, you would provide it, correct? Yes, correct. Secondly, even if you summed up the 2 point sources, why would I sum them up? What does that have to do with anything? What does even summing them up mean? So again, he's thrown in jargon. summing up point sources. You don't sum up point sources. Anyway, starting at those edges, exactly as the single slit math does. So let's understand the single slit math doesn't do anything else. That's exactly what it does. It says there's a distance. That distance is understood to be part of the geometry that's going to create your sine theta angles, and it will tell you your path length differences. So it's exactly what the math is doing. He's trying to say, no, it doesn't do that, when that's exactly what it's already conceded. Huygens concedes the argument. It puts the waves exactly where I say they are, which is on the surfaces, because that's where the action is. And unlike Feynman's silly prediction that every single photon is randomized, that's a pile of shit. Some of the photons go straight through, and only the ones by the surface are the ones getting diffracted and ending up at a point on the screen. So that means nothing. Even if you summed up the 2 point sources starting at those edges and ending up at a point on the screen, you wouldn't get the pattern where each envelope. So again, there's no envelope in the single slit. Huygens really isn't used in the double slit because they already have 2 openings, moron. If they used Huygens in the double slit, you do understand that that would mean 4 sources, don't you? I mean, Huygens creates 2 sources in the single slit. If they used it in the double slit, you do understand that's going to create 4 sources, right? That doesn't escape you. Well, no. You see, again, he does know that's the truth, and he doesn't care, because his mission here is to be a liar and a deceiver and a misinformer. He's trying to imply to people that there's some reason to believe Huygens is consistently used, that Huygens works, when obviously it can't work by definition, because it's creating 2 sources in the single slit, but there's only 2 sources in the double slit. Young's experiment shows only 2 sources. You do understand that, right? 95% of every drawing that's ever been done of the 2 slit, there's only 2 sources. You do acknowledge that, right, retard? Asshole? Moron? No, he won't acknowledge that, because that's the truth. And the truth must not be accepted. Okay. And point sources on the screen. So again, just completely false premise, right? Yes. You would get a pattern where each envelope, so there's not, whatever this each envelope thing is, right? I mean, I pointed out that in the diffraction gradient, you could call them all envelopes, okay? Because there's so many layers of pattern. Each tiny surface is contributing to the pattern. So when you have 500 lines, you have 500 patterns being superimposed on each other. Was half the width. So where did this come from? Okay, you would get a pattern where each envelope is half the width as the pattern predicted by Huygens math. So there's no Huygens math. He won't link to this ever being taken place. I've already shown you the stack exchange again, where the guy clearly is identifying the 2 outside surfaces as being the sources for the small bars inside of the envelope. Clearly stated. Now, he's not objecting to that. He's not saying that guy was wrong. He's not saying anything to indicate that I was misinformed when I read that. So there's no indication of how he's arguing I'm wrong when I'm saying that guy was right. He's telling you the truth. The fact is, that was the only good answer I've ever read at Stack Exchange. That was a good answer. I mean, it was convoluted language, but he told you the fucking truth. The outside surfaces are creating the little bars. And that's the truth. So it's not 2 slit patterns. It's not 2 surfaces in here and then 2 surfaces in here. As I pointed out, it's a wave would have to be right where the impediment is, right? So let's understand, this is this is what the stack exchange guy essentially described. Okay, he didn't go into the interior envelope pattern, but it was obvious if the small bars are being created by the 2 outside surfaces, doesn't that kind of significantly imply that the only alternative for the envelope would be the inside surfaces? So the stack exchange guy is acknowledging, okay, that this surface and this surface, the 2 outside surfaces, are creating the little bars in the pattern. So the little bars are being created by the outside surfaces. All right, completely consistent with what I've been saying. So that means the wave has to look like that. Okay, so the wave went right through this and made this big giant wave. And your secondary wave, the other wave that's interfering, right, the two waves that have to interfere with each other are this one and that one. So somehow this wave and this wave interfere with each other to create this pattern. Now, that visually is retarded. Doesn't make any sense. There's no wave tank that will show you that happening, right? I mean, I can't put, oh, I'll put waves in a water tank and that'll happen. No, it won't happen. And those two waves will interfere. No, that won't happen. So clearly their traditional drawing is this, not too smart thing, okay, with just two waves. And these two waves can't do anything. They can't function. They can't create anything. And again, these two waves can't do this pattern because it's only two possibilities. And so what the real answer is, those two preposterous things don't happen. And the real answer is, there's a wave here, and there's a wave here, and there's a wave here. If you want to force it to be waves. So just understand that the wave source has to be here. Now, obviously, I'm saying it's quite obviously this is just a source of diffracted photons in the sense that the photons are being changed in their orientation because they're hitting electrons. The electrons are moving, and they're going to move in the direction of the photon. Okay, that's going to add direction. And whatever momentum the electron has will also add some. And obviously, the electrons are going to have a direction that's going to be related to the surface. That is, the electrons are going to either be moving that way or that way. Okay, because they're on a surface. So you're going to be adding this way or that way to that way, and that's going to give you this way or that way or that way or that way. I mean, it's either going to be one or the other. That's why the slits are rectangular. That's why the whole thing is the way it is. It's because the electrons are stuck to the surface and they're only going to go this way. So the photon's going this way, it's going to change the electrons going this way and this way. Photons going this way. When you add up the two, you're going to get that way and that way and that way and that way and that way. All right. Okay, each envelope was half the width as the pattern predicted by Huygens math. So there's no Huygens math. There's no reference to this. It's not really even conceivable what he's saying. And it's clearly not a refutation of what the guy at the Stack Exchange said. That's because in the actual math, so here he goes, point sources 1/2 the width apart. Point sources 1/2 the width apart. So that means inside one of these slits, there's two waves inside of the slit. He says that works. Now, there's absolutely zero evidence of that working. That'll give you the right answer. Zero. They'll never show an experiment where they did the experiment, they measured it, and it came out to be that as the truth. So he has nothing to back this up but his words. And clearly it's not what the most advanced web pages on the subject say. So when they do the more complex math of combining the two waves, the four waves, right? The four wave math gets the right answers. Clearly. It makes sense anyway, it's coherent. But your Huygens makes two wave theory, and then Huygens makes, with two slits, it only makes two waves. That doesn't make any coherent sense. Why does Huygens make two waves when it's a single slit and only two waves when it's a double slit? That's incoherent. So this is just a dodge. That 1/2, it doesn't change 1/2 the width. It actually doubles the wavelength. So, if you make the wavelength 1/2, that's the same thing as making the distance twice as long. Duh. Okay. So the Huygens math predicts a pattern twice as wide as your predicted pattern. So those are just words. You have absolutely no evidence. You go find somebody who argues that. Go find somebody doing that math. You won't find it because it doesn't exist. That's delusionary mush. You have no evidence for it at all. I've played Professor Lewin. He doesn't do that. I've played, all of so many videos. Where was this ever? Where did they ever draw it that way? Where did they ever show it that way? Where does that even happen in their math? So it's just a lie. Also, you would not end up with more dark bands. You can't end up with anything other than there's in phase, they're out of phase. Those are the two choices, retard. Not in phase. There, you're done. That's a dark band. Not in phase, it's a dark band. Okay? You don't need anything called destructive. You don't need any of those kind of words. You just say not in phase. Dark band. If you add two slits because rays add constructively. So says you. It's just retarded. The point is if something is in phase, you'll see a photon. If it's not in phase, you won't see a photon. There's no other choices. Rays don't make it any different. There's no new rule because you called it a ray. I mean, it's too stupid. The whole argument is nothing's happening in this space, idiot. The whole argument is it's happening on the surface. You're either in phase at the surface or you're not in phase at the surface. Period. All right. Whereas waves can add destructively. And you're arguing that you have some evidence that photons are waves. And you really don't, because as I'm just pointing out, there is no similarity. The water doesn't do this. Sound doesn't do this. Sound doesn't create four sources. A sound creates two sources, two surfaces. I mean, the double slit creates two waves. Sound has actually two waves because sound actually does interfere in the space because sound is through a medium. But there's no evidence that light's doing that now. I mean, it's clearly demonstrated that, as pointed out, Young's drawing of light like sound was wrong 200 years ago when he drew it. And it remains wrong. And the real math doesn't use it. And so you just keep lying in defense of a theory that has been outed by your own scientists. The ones who have any integrity are pointing out, oh yeah, the envelope pattern is created by the interior surfaces and the little bars are created by the exterior surfaces. They're already conceding the point. They just won't say it because they're cowards. Anyway. You don't understand math. So again, there's no math presented here at all. So you have no math to defend your theory that Huygens creates two waves in the single slit and only two waves in the double slit. There's no math theory. There's no evidence that makes any sense. You lose. Okay. You are the missing link. You are a liar and a scammer and a bum and a creep and a shithead, and you really should be outlawed, as humans shouldn't go this low. Humans should, if you can't rise yourself above being a fucking piece of shit. Like I said, even animals aren't assholes. You're an asshole. A jackass who can't do anything fair, can't do anything by any kind of book, can't do anything out of principle, can't do anything with any integrity. You're worse than a pig. You're worse than a dumb animal because you can know better. You know you're breaking the rules and you don't care. You think all the rules are meant for somebody else. They're not meant to control bad behavior. Okay? They're just in your way because you're God and you're going to tell everybody what the truth is. You're not going to defend it. You're just going to tell it. All right. Goodbye. Oh, the little pretend that he's leaving. Oh, yeah, sure you are. You gutless piece of shit. And your little tribe of brosies and the other little assholes who think, oh, yeah, it's really great when you have to resort to petty bullshit arguments because you don't have a real good one. Yeah, it's just pathetic. So anyway, Mr. Moscow guy, your comment will be deleted because that comment will be deleted and blocked. And, so you just sort of wasted your comment. But the good news is I'm actually going to read your comment. And so you got away with it this time. But just know in the future you could lose your comment if you're going to comment. If you're going to interact with complete assholes who are obvious assholes. Bad on you, I'm just saying. To the first note in your comment, I was also expecting and asking the same a week or so ago. I don't know if you were. You were really making the argument that Huygens is some sort of rational mechanism. That it's okay to have two waves made by Huygens in the single slit, but only two waves in the double slit too. That made sense to you? Anyway. Namely, that scattered photons would cause a random fuzzy spread of light. And why would they do that? They're in phase or they're not in phase. Those are only two ways. Why would they be more out of phase than in phase? There's no reason to believe they would be more likely to be out of phase. They're spreading on one plane. You have to understand that. That's the whole point of this, rectangle. They're spreading this way. I mean, they can only be in phase or out of phase, and there's no reason why they're going to be out of phase more than to be in phase. Anyway, on the screen, but at 5:25 of the video, he explains that those photons are not the same anymore. Well, what I explained was we're not talking about combining photons. We're talking about combining the elements of photons. So again, the whole thing breaks down because when I say photon, it doesn't mean anything in this vocabulary because people are thinking it's a clump or it's a one wave or so. I don't know what you're thinking. Clearly, the drawing of a photon is multiple humps. If you understand that the photon is multiple elements, I'm just saying one element went this way, one element went that way. Now you're just going to put the elements back together on the screen. I've sort of made that so clear that it really shouldn't have to be re-emphasized over and over again. That sometimes I might say the word photon and I'm really just talking about the element of the photon. Anyway, they lose their per phase polarization. So I don't know why you're connecting polarization to phase. So that's just too bizarre. Alright, so I've said it so many times. Polarization is the size of the photon. So I've described it as an envelope. Find a piece of paper. I mean, I shouldn't have to. You take an envelope and you just draw on it. Okay, one little bit up in this corner, then another bit here, another bit here, and another bit here. All the same distance apart going across the envelope. Now, the envelope is very thin, okay, so you understand the photon doesn't have any dimension in one dimension. It just has dimension in this dimension. It's a pattern. And the photons, the little bits are in parallel with each other, but they're not exactly all lined up like a stream of bullets. So it's a gun. Bang, 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 bang. Right? I'm just moving the gun up as I shoot the bullets. You can understand the bullets will be in space, separated by distance in two dimensions. No distance in the third dimension, just in two dimensions. Alright? And so polarization is one of those dimensions. Wavelength is the other dimension. They're not the same thing. Alright. They lose their phase. So losing the polarization is a separate thing. Being spread this way, right? And then you could be spread back down this way. So this is an important... well, we'll get to it. I think the other comment gets to polarization. But anyway, so that's the starter. I'm just pointing out polarization is the this way part. Wavelength is the this way part. So the forward part isn't being changed by the interaction with the electrons. The speed isn't being substantially changed in the sense that whatever speed changes there are, all the little bits are experiencing it. So any bit that hits an electron ends up experiencing the same speed change, that is timing change. So they're always experiencing the same event. And so when they arrive, they'll still have their phase. They'll have their period in space. The dimensions of their wavelength will still be the same dimensions. And only when scattered photons hitting the screen combine with other scattered photons. So again, that's really not the right way to say it, right? Scattered elements of the photon. The elements of the photon are what's being scattered. A photon can theoretically go in, the pattern on the envelope, and just one notch is scraped off by the electrons, and the rest of the photon is still intact. Just one little bit was knocked off. But the fact is, it's still broken until that one bit is put back. So it has to collect another bit to make it a full photon again. The full pattern that causes the electric effect that makes it possible for us to say a photon arrived. All right. Combined with other scattered photons. Those that will be in the original phase again will produce the fringe pattern. They'll produce a photon, yes. They won't produce the fringe pattern. They can't produce both the on photon and the off photon. They can't produce both the reconstructed pattern and an unreconstructed pattern. So obviously they're only creating the photons that you see. In the case of the double slit, that's how I understand the explanation now. Well, I don't know if I'm not too encouraged by that verbiage, just because that's certainly not how I'd say it, I don't think. So then Bill responds, okay, and that's really Fartley. So let's just all understand this is just Fartley, okay? Mickey Fartley, Sticky Fartley. Anyway, also, according to him, polarization makes the photons turn into frisbees. So obviously I never said that. I use frisbees in an analogy for why bars are relevant. And as I have pointed out in the last year or so, that's skeptical as a good analogy, okay, because frankly the polarization filter is the opposite of your intuition. So many people still think the polarizing film direction that blocks the light is in the opposite direction to the polarization, and it's the other way around. Okay, so something tall, okay, so it's polarized this way, ends up getting blocked by a filter in the same direction. So if I put the bars in the same direction, the frisbee, so to speak, okay, doesn't get through. And when I put the bars in the direction of the frisbee, that is, I'm throwing the frisbee this way, okay, the irony is it gets through, okay, the bar is going this way. And so that's the part that doesn't, it breaks intuition. So what I've pointed out is, frankly, so it's been a mushy truth for both, for conventional physics has it still as kind of a mushy truth. Okay, people aren't really secure. Like even Franklin, who, he still misunderstands that the filter that's blocking, okay, is the opposite. So you're not taking something in this dimension and making it go through these openings. Now their theory is somehow, because these bars are somehow causing an attraction, and this thing crashes into the bars and makes electricity. They have absolutely no evidence that it ever makes any electricity, that anything is conductive, that there's any signal, being absorbed, that the energy of the photons is actually being absorbed by these bars. They have zero evidence of that being true, and these have actually been made out of metal, little tiny wires put very close together. So they have made diffraction gradients out of actual metal and actually sent microwaves, and they've never collected any electricity. So they've never shown that if I put the filter this way, I collect a bunch of electricity, and if I turn it this way, I don't get any electricity. So there's no such experiment. So that theory is crap. It's just made up. This asshole won't show us how that's been proven. So we're just talking about theory against theory. So my argument is, obviously I'm saying the polarization is just distance in space. Okay, so it's just like the wavelength. So this is the wavelength is going this way, right? And the polarization just means it's this. Okay, this is the elements of a photon. So let's just say there has to be 4 of them, and they have to have the right frequency, and they are polarized. That is, they occupy a space, okay, that's proportional to the wavelength. So they're as high as they are distant from each other, somewhere around there. It might be half, might be a quarter. Doesn't really matter. What you're going to end up with is the fact that the spacing of these bars can be smaller than the wavelength, and the thing still gets through, okay, like half is the size. So that's about the limit, though. But my argument would be is what's really happening is just, again, this argument about understanding that this surface is only going to bend things that way and that way. not going to bend things that way or that way or that way. So it is only diverging in one dimension. It's only diverging this way. And the same thing happens when it goes through this filter. This arrangement, okay, when the little bits go through, some of them will be thrown up, some will be thrown down. So you're taking this polarization, just like the frequency, you're messing it up. But you're messing it up consistently, in a consistent way. So you're going to throw some of these, this bit might be thrown down, and this one will be thrown up in this direction, and so you're messing up the polarization. And so now the photon will be broken again. So when you put it through the filter, one bit might be here, one bit will be here, one bit will hit right on the bar, one bit will go here. So these three get through, this one doesn't. So now you have to reconstruct it again. And what you're going to reconstruct it out of is another photon where this one bends back into that position. So you're just putting the pieces back together. Now that's sort of confirmed as reasonable speculation by the mere fact that if I take two filters in the opposite direction and block 100% of the light, okay, all of it is somehow gone. All I do is put another filter in this way. I got, what is it? How much do I get back per filter? 30%? Something like that. So now I get back 30% of the light. It might be 22%, but I'm not sure. Anyway, the exact doesn't matter. The point is, obviously the light was still here. It wasn't being destroyed by anything. It's still here to be repaired. So this one broke it a certain way. This one's going to fix half of it another way. And then this one's going to finish fixing it. And you're going to get 30% of the photons back. Because you're putting intermediate change in that's sort of knocking things that... So ones that went down are now going to be thrown back this way. So they'll fill this position. You can sort of understand that one that was two wavelengths off, two amounts of distance, can be thrown at an angle back to this distance, and now that'll fit with the other thing. You'll be back in sequence. And that's what this is doing. So this is taking photons that are messed up, and it's putting some of them back in sequence to go through that filter. Something, it's probably 22%, because this would be 25%. 50% were broken here. If you fixed 25%, right, you got half of them back with this filter, then you can understand that 25% will get through here. But anyway. So yeah, I mean, all of this, there's no, no model. It has to go through all of these different events. I mean, it has to go through this obstacle course of examination. And all of these subjects have a lot of depth in the sense that you can make the filter out of plastic, you can make the filter out of metal, you can do lots of different things, lots of different experiments to see if you can make the results come out differently. Just like I can make the polarization filter by etching, or by actually having obstructions. Lots of different ways. Anyway, so there's a lot of information. I'm just saying, they're saying theirs is the only possible model. They're claiming that no particle model can. Yes, a particle model can. They never thought of all the particle models. They never did any of that work. They never thought about it much at all. They're just devoted to Jesus is God. They don't want to hear about any other miracle maker in some other region, right? Jesus is the guy. All the rest of them are fake. That's all this is about. This is really just religious kooks defending a religion. They don't care about facts. They don't care about scrutiny. They don't care about their burden of proof. They just care about maligning anybody else's God. Your God is ugly. Or your God is silly. Your God is immoral. That's all they're doing. Alright. So Moscow types a whole bunch of crap to a troll. But anyway. Bad or good analogies don't really count in the dilemma, in my opinion. Well, I think analogies have to count because that's all we really have. And the fact is that the Frisbee argument was a good argument for Frisbees. Okay, it was a good argument for if the photon was a solid object. But when you start to turn it into bits, then you start to understand maybe not a good analogy. Because what we're really talking about is diffraction. We're really talking about making Frisbees change their direction, not allowing something to pass through. We are forced to use, I don't know, linguistic analogies, even metaphors describing the phenomenon. Yes, you just said we don't like that, and now you're saying yes. I don't know. You're saying analogies don't count, and then you say we're forced to use them. Well, they must count. Anyway, the point is it's a legitimate criticism in the sense that I used it as an analogy, and frankly, I was wrong to use it because it doesn't analogize to the actual circumstance, which is the fact is that the Frisbees are little tiny pieces of a bigger story. And the fact is if I can deflect the Frisbees in different ways, I'll keep them in one dimension. If I scatter them in 2 dimensions, you can understand, if I scatter them this way and then I scatter them this way, I'm going to be pretty hopeless in putting them back together. I'm not going to get too many patterns reconstructed. And so that's the argument, that I'm diminishing the amount of any hope. See, a circle is still only diffracting each individual Frisbee one way. It's either this way or that way or that way. But if I deflect the Frisbee twice, that is, I make the Frisbee deflect this way, and then I put it through another thing that makes it deflect this way, then you can understand at the screen I'm going to have a really hard time putting any Frisbees back in phase because they're spread so thin. So that would be a better analogy, is all I'm arguing. The analogy only worked if this subject was as narrow as a photon is just an object, when no, it's not a object. It's an event. Anyway. Even metaphors describing the phenomenon bits point like dimensionless particles. I don't even want to get into that dimensionless crap because I think the dimensions are actually really important to how this whole thing works. I'm actually thinking, electrons are decagon? 5-sided objects. But anyway, that's a whole nother, just because it creates that interesting thing where at one side you have the point and at the other side you have the flat surface. That's what a 5-sided surface does for you. You have a flat surface on one side and you have a point at the other side. An interesting phenomenon in terms of if you made objects like that, obviously from the pointed side, anything you shoot at them would reflect away from you. And at the flat side, anything you shot at them would bounce back at you. That kind of thing. So it does create interesting geometry. Wave packets. So I don't know, why do I want to do this wave packet thing? That's obviously not what they think. It's not a packet. They think it's doing this. That's how it's getting through the polarizing filters, because it's a snake and it snakes its way through somehow. It's some sort of thing moving in the field doing this, and it's, well, whatever. At least you concede it's a whatever. I would rather turn eyes to mine to contemplate the source of the light, material and dimensions used in the slits, distances, and the interaction that possibly happens in the experiment. Righto. Yeah, there's so many interesting aspects, right? Because the thicker I make the material of the slits. Let's say I made so it's like a bored, milled hole through a 1-inch piece of steel. How deep do I have to make the slit before I wipe out all the photons? Any hope of reconstruction? Because you're talking about a bunch of internal reflections at best, right? So if I can make it very mirror finish, shoot the light through, you assume the electrons are going to be, deflecting the photons. The deflections are now going to reflect off the mirror inside and then come out. What kind of mess would that make? All right. Recently, the interesting, they're spending, over $12 billion on this Webb telescopy thing. Just imagine all the experiments you could do with $12 billion. All the experiments that won't get done because $12 billion was pissed away on an infrared telescope, which doesn't even make any sense. Right? We know the wavelength of infrared is twice as big as the blue. So we're making a telescope that sees in big giant pixels. The wavelength tells you how fine you can see something is dependent on wavelength. The higher resolution, you can see more pixels in blue light than you can see in red light. I mean, it's just doesn't make any sense, frankly. Anyway, recently this interesting video about the photoelectric effect was published. Well, I guess we'll have to go there. So first we'll finish reading this stuff. Light is something that has properties. It can interact with surfaces by various measurable ways. I'm saying the ways are pretty narrow, actually. I mean, they're various, but I'm just saying it's pretty... I'm saying the universe is probably going to be made out of one way. There's only one thing happening. Energy hits an electron moves, energy is changed. Where the energy was going is now different than where it was going before it hit the electron. First, could we agree that light interacts with surfaces on the slits? So, of course he can't agree with that. First, because that's a violation of Feynman completely. So all the probability stuff goes out the window because some of the photons are not deflected then. Their assumption is all the photons are deflected. All of them are diverging. All of them are diffracting. Okay? They do not concede that any photon goes through the experiment untouched. And clearly Huygens is saying that. Okay, so they're already in a box that says they'll never be able to concede that, because as soon as they concede the surfaces are the game, there's no game. The wave theory is dead. You can't keep a wave theory and recognize the surfaces as the actor. Is there any way to prevent electron interaction of the photons in the 3D surfaces of the slits? Well, again, only 2D is relevant because the electron, again, is attached to a surface and it's just doing this. It can't do this and this and that and that. It's not doing all that other stuff. The atoms you're going through are not atoms at those angles. The atoms you're going through are the atoms pointed out. So, anyway, 3D because slits must have a depth also. Yeah, again, the depth just means how many electrons you're going through. I mean, how many you might hit. So I guess part of my argument would be is if you hit more than one electron, you get deflected more. But that would be speculation. If you hit 3, I mean, depending on how many you hit and which way it was going is going to decide which way you end up going. But it's still in the two-dimensional plane of spread this way. There's no spread this way. If we can prevent the interaction when we should think, if we can't prevent the interaction, then we should think how the interaction might affect to the photons traveling through the slits. I don't know. Would the interaction be trivial so that it happens only locally on the slits and would not affect the final pattern of the photons on the screen? I don't know what that is saying. Or would there be scattering effects on the slits that somehow reflect to the screen? Well, clearly that's the argument. Yes, that's the right answer. In the slits that somehow reflect. Look, the point is what is there a physical mechanical cause, or is there woo? An infinite number of microwaves do mathematics and come up with the answer, or is the answer that yes, Photons are composite objects. They crash into electrons. The bits are scattered, and you reconstruct a photon, because a photon is just a pattern. You reconstruct dot, dot, dot out of dot, dot, dot. Anyway, it would mean that either some photons that were emitted from the source are only partly going through the slits with a changed phase. See, it says polarization. See, the whole point is the size of the slit is being, the polarization is deciding how big this hole can be, and you still get a photon. See, again, we're back to the microwave oven. Why are you allowed to look inside of a microwave oven? Okay, because you can see the visible photons can get through the holes. Okay, there's holes. The visible photons can get through the hole. They're small. Their polarization is small. The microwaves have a big polarization. The big polarization can't get through the small hole. I mean, that's it's that simple. So the microwave radiation can't get out because the polarization is large, which means you're guaranteeing that every single one of the microwave gets deflected. And which way is it getting? You're not putting it through rectangles, right? So the whole microwave can't get through, right? Even if you use smaller rectangles to duplicate, you're still in trouble, in the sense that now you're only going to spread this way and this way and this way and this way. So now you have a chance of reconstructing, okay, a microwave. That half the microwave gets broken off, right? One goes through, half of it breaks off and goes that way, and then the other one right next to it breaks off this way and goes that way, and then and then you have the other circumstance where they both end up going the same direction to a point, and they're put back together. You take this half of the microwave and you add it to some other half of the microwave in terms of polarization, and now you have back a whole microwave. But that's why it's round. Round causes more chaos, because now you are sending pieces in 3 dimensions, in 2 dimensions, rather than just the single dimension of this way or that way. So, it's the difference between spreading bullets this way and then spreading bullets this way, scattering them every which way. But that's the size thing. That's why polarization is significant. The light gets through this hole easy on the microwave oven. The microwave, no chance. Way too big, the polarization. So that's pretty simple, right? Convinces me. That's a pretty convincing argument. Pretty, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. All right. Anyway. So this is, slits with changed phase, polarization, quanta, etc., or even the photons scattered from the surface are not the same photons anymore, but secondary photons only. Secondary is a bad word to use. I'm just, obviously if the piece of energy hits the electron will cause an activity in the universe that causes a new piece of energy to be reflected. It's not the same force bit that pushed the electron isn't the one that's going to go somewhere. There's going to be it's going to exchange this. It's going to, a photon hits the back of my hand, pushes it. This reflection is now a new piece of energy. It's not the same piece here. This piece is going to reflect back that way. It's heading back towards the source, actually, eventually. So, that's what the reflections are probably made out of, too. But anyway, that's a whole nother subject. Don't want to get into reflections. Okay, so you don't really want to say secondary photons. You just want to say it's a duplicate that now has a different vector of momentum. It's now moving in a different direction than it was when it went in. I know that it's going deeper into the energy level of the description. We might be in trouble to think that photons have any identity at all. Well, fuck this. I don't know why you do that. I have no idea why you're just saying, well, we can't figure any of this out. Bullshit. It's a mechanical process. We can figure it out. Everything is just an exchange of energy. And what is energy? Energy has to already exist. So clearly you're just as I said, that the matter is just a catalyst. It allows force bits to hit force bits, essentially. It allows them to do something different because it doesn't move at the same speed. So it's really just the energy is just pushing the matter. Everything is in a position because the energy around it is equal, and that's it. And balance is completely illusionary in the sense that we are hurling through space in a direction. So my cup and me and my shoes, we're all going in the same direction through space. So it looks like we're not going that direction, but we are all going that direction. Anyway, I suspect the whole concept of photon will be in trouble to maintain its shape and reality, just a loaded word with all kinds of irrelevant stuff ever since Gilbert Lewis invented in 1926. Well, obviously I don't, Einstein's the one who made the word relevant. So whoever said it absolutely first doesn't mean much. And the point to make is that it should never have been called a ton, because that's a huge mistake. Just like you don't say atom ton. There's no atom ton. But we know it's not a ton. Okay. Anyway, at this point, I'm not that much concerned with the deepest model that would explain the fringe phenomenon. I mean, damn you. I mean, fuck you. After all of this conversation, you're sitting there doing this wishy-washy crap that you don't get that the fringes are entirely being created by interaction with the energy and the surface. That part you should be able to concede. I just try to get facts right in the setup. I suppose photons cannot travel through the slits without being in contact with the electrons in the surface of the slits until the slit opening are so big that the photons could actually go through them without touching the side. Again, it's not going to stop you from making bits of a photon. Because you broke the polarization doesn't mean you can't remake it. It's just that you're going to make very few photons. And that's the whole point about single photon experiments and different other ways. You're breaking both the polarization, and the direction, so you really are making a mess out of the photons. But the fact is, some of them will be reconstructible. Go through them without touching the side surface of the slits. That is a reasonable starting point for me. Microwave oven is a reasonable starting point for me. Why can't the microwaves get out the stupid little holes? Why can't they do it? Okay. It raises two pretty fundamental questions. Why would the size of the slits and the space between the slits have any effect on the pattern if the photon was a wave which front is supposed to be everywhere? The wave theory, again, is a medium theory. So, again, you have to be pulling everything with you. The whole thing doesn't make any, it doesn't make any sense. Where does the energy come from a single photon to be going across that entire wavefront? And of course, photons never land like that. No photon ever lands here and then here. It doesn't land as a bazillion photons. It lands as one piece of energy in one small location. It's just such a pile of shit to sit there and say wave theory makes any sense right on the surface, right? Hitting the surface, it makes no sense. There's no wave theory that makes any sense because photons clearly don't land like a wave. They don't land in multiple locations. Waves land in multiple locations. Again, let's understand, Feynman was opposed to wave theory of light. He actually said in one of his public recorded lectures, I wish they didn't teach it. Okay? Because it doesn't work. He points to the photomultiplier on his blackboard and says, that thing don't work that way. Okay? It doesn't work that way. It's not collecting waves. Anyway, however, but Feynman was, of course, completely idiotic because Feynman believed in a random God. However, the dimensions of this, just calculate and such. However, the dimensions of the slits and the spacing between them matters, as we know from the experiments. And the shape of the slits and lots of things matter. But maybe someone can prove or reasonably argue that particle interactions between photons and slits and surfaces does not happen, and that we don't need to count that for some reason. Well, again, they can't counter argue that it doesn't work because the geometry is kind of obvious. I've already pointed out the theory theoretically works. They can't disprove its theoretical capacity to explain the circumstance. What they don't have is any physical evidence that it doesn't work, that model isn't the truth. I'm interested to hear more about that argument. Only argument I have heard so far is that somehow the fine structure, oh no, of the atom keeps scattering effects real but irrelevant. So, you get into fine structure, that crap, again, is another. All right, well, let's just go. I have the web page open, so let's go there. And right off the bat, you're getting one of these images. So again, we're talking about interferometry again. This gets into all kinds of crapola. All right. Now, what do you see in that pattern? That's exactly the difference. So let's understand. That's basically just saying, okay, you take that round pattern and you just cut a rectangle through it, and you have a slit style pattern. So just ignore the stuff going up and down and all that crap, and just look at it going sideways. And you can sort of see, what's it doing that's so obvious? It's getting smaller as you go outside, right? Where in the double slit or the single slit, the pattern gets wider, right? The bars get bigger and bigger and bigger as you go further out. So this is obviously the other guy's diffraction, right? So this is the going in pattern. This isn't the spreading out pattern. This is the going in pattern. And what you're doing is your line of sight, your straight line, there's your shortest distance between the object causing the effect and the surface. That shortest distance is here. And when you go in, you're going a longer distance, right? So now you're stretching the inside of the pattern. So the outside of the pattern is creating where the real size, and now because you're going inside, you're creating the stretching of the pattern. So it's exactly the opposite of the double slit, right? So you can sort of identify a pattern going in, the bars get thicker as you go in, and a pattern going out, the bars get thicker as you go out, but only if you're viewing it on a flat screen. So again, this is all based on the fact that we're not viewing these patterns on the screen we should be viewing them on. This one should be viewed on a screen, that I think goes this way, the opposite way. But regardless, that would make it more accurate because you would get back the distance differences. You'd be back on the radius that your math is predicting. So anyway, but yeah, it's not even getting. I mean, this is based on so much crap. Everybody's involved in this shit. Dirac, all kind. Michelson, Morley in here. I mean, it's just this is made out of such a pile of crap. Hamiltonians, Zigwigagogs, whatever this guy is, Biggerog. I mean, I should find out. In physics, Zitterbiggergug. Jittery motion in German. Oh, isn't that funny? Jittery motion. So use this crappy word to say jittery motion. Oh, just too funny. Well, anyway, I mean, it's got so much crap in it. It's got kinetic energy in it, okay? So, fail right there, right? As soon as you're going to start saying we've got our equations to equalize and they're using the kinetic energy formula, I'm going to laugh because I'm just going to say, yes, so you got the wrong answer. Because there is no such thing as your MV squared bullshit. But anyway, so yeah, I don't see any, raising this fine structured constant in the middle of this conversation is kind of just bullshit. Because we know electrons in this circumstance aren't doing spectral things. So we're not talking about the target absorbing photons of different colors, and those kinds of interactions that would be dependent on the atoms, right? The atoms are going to tell you what photons it can make electricity out of. So the structure of the atoms are going to decide what frequencies will cause the atoms to transfer the pressure and to do it constructively, that is on resonance, to take the frequency information and use it to complement the event, That is to make the electron go faster and faster. And that is dependent on fine structure of the atoms. But we don't need to talk about that to talk about what happens at the surfaces, because the surfaces aren't going to be about the fine structure constant. They're just going to be about the fact that electrons are moved by photons. Okay, but I've not seen or heard more details on how this happens. It's probably just a guess, and the wiki article doesn't give much help on how to connect the double slit experiment with the structure interactions. Well, because it really doesn't have anything to do with it. That's probably the reason. I'm just saying that the spectral analysis isn't really interference either. Okay, it's, you know, you're really just depending on there are different kinds of diffraction. Let's put it that way. A prism is doing something different than a slit. Although you can make them do similar things, that is spread light, they're going to spread it for a different reason. So that should be the point made, I suppose. It's the same, you know, I'm saying different reason, but it's a similar process. But they'll do it differently, is the point. And so you got to be really careful combining you know, this is just the same argument. You can't, you know, it's really evil when physics decided in the 50s that every wave, I mean, every phenomenon that produced an on-off pattern, it was obviously an interference pattern. That was a huge, giant mistake of physics to assume that on-off is always interference. Wave interference especially, you know, specifically, that only a wave can interfere. When anything at a frequency can interfere, anything. I can shoot bullets and I can create patterns of motion in an object if I shoot the bullets from different sides. And because of the pattern, I can have both guys are shooting bullets at the same rate, and the thing is wobbling, and the fact is there'll be a certain point where it'll wobble, it'll stabilize, it'll stop moving, then it'll start moving, and then it'll fall over. I mean, you know, that kind of thing will happen. So it's just about the energy and the frequency. You don't need a wave to cause resonant phenomenon in objects. The frequency is causing it. You don't need a wave to be doing it. Alright, that's probably enough. Let's see what this other video was just for fun. Alright, so this is supposed to be a recently interesting video about the photoelectric effect. Okay, so this is probably, it would be something horrible. Right? It's going to irritate the hell out of me, no doubt. Commercial, of course. Kitty. Yes. Oh, cats. It's just so sad. All the poor little unloved cats in the world. So depressing. The Action Lab. Oh, yeah. So this is kind of annoying because this is always this bullshit about doing experiments in this excessive way. Blah, 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 blah. Alright, so knocking electrons with light. So we already know the effect. I don't know if there's going to be anything in here that's going to be all that interesting. So obviously you can take 10 million lumens of light, shine them on a piece of metal, and you could probably make a squirrel, you know, mechanical squirrel run around in circles. I mean, you probably can create enough electricity that way. But obviously, if you put a solar panel on there, it'll work even better. Or if you make an actual device that's actually much more efficient at collecting the charge being created. I mean, it's creating charge. That's all that's happening, right? I mean, that's what electricity is first you have to have charge, right? First you have to create a charge, and then you have electricity. And creating a charge means you eject an electron. Or you push in an electron, one way or the other. Alright, so we won't bother playing it. We'll play a little bit of it.
Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you that light is actually made out of small little particles. I'm going to be showing you the photoelectric effect.
Okay, so like I said, the photon isn't actually a particle. So again, it's really not true. You know, but it's a composite object made of quanta. And you still need a number of them to hit in sequence, the right sequence, to eject an electron. So you're still using a clump detector to detect your photons. If you use a clump detector, the fact is, everything will look clumpy. So if you're only detecting things that make clumps because you're using a clump detector to see with, then everything will look like it's a clump. So your proof is a little sloppy. I agree that photons are made out of corpuscles of energy, but they're made out of more than one corpuscle in a pattern called a frequency. That's the really true part. Maybe I'll do a whole video of this guy's video. I'm really not making fun of him. I'm kind of having fun with the fact that he does have that kind of weird accent-y thing. You know, that is just, it just says to you, imitate that. Sorry. It's like the Schwarzenegger thing, you know. You just, oh yeah, I gotta imitate that. Yeah. But anyway. Yeah, that's enough of a video. Alright. So maybe we'll do that video next time. I don't know. I'm just assuming there's not going to be anything. Well, maybe there'll be something in there that just says, oh yeah, that's an interesting piece of information. So we'll see. But till then, till the next time and such. This recorded, right? I tested it, didn't I? Yeah, I did. Okay. It's just funny, right? This thing works perfect. It works for months. Everything's just fine. The simple screen recorder software, for some reason, isn't saving the right mic source. And that's what's causing it to fail now and then. And it's just like, why? I sit there and save, you know, do it through the procedure, you know. I close it. It's supposed to save it. It doesn't save it. It keeps fucking it up. It keeps, you know, keeps going to a mic that doesn't even exist on a camera that's broken. I mean, I can't figure out why it's not saving the setting. I can make a new profile. I can make a new this, you know, and it just keeps jumping to the wrong mic source. Anyway, just little things like that. Just you say, you know, this is working so well, and yet it has these flaws in it. Just say, how the fuck could it screw that up? I mean, saving the properties is not that difficult. Alright. Anyway. This has been a DraftScience video presentation. Thank you for your attention and such. Yeah, if you watched all the way through, yeah, appreciate it. I wish there was more other people that were making videos discussing this stuff, but there just isn't. So all I can do is take grains of their argument. And again, the only grains we're getting is from the trolls who can't argue fairly. They can't argue what you actually say. You know, they have to argue what you said 10 years ago, or, you know, some kind of bullshit. Anyway, it's just the fact. That's the way the world is, so one must just endeavor to persevere through it. And that's what I'll do. So, until next time.